Advisory Board, Dr. Benjamin Bickman.
Good morning. Good morning. It is so wonderful to be with you. Good morning. I am so happy to be with you again. These events in the Asia Pacific area are just so wonderful, and you all look so good. I compliment you and congratulate you on getting here. Thank you for letting me be your professor. I always say this, and I mean it. It is so fun to be able to go from my university and teach students who are really excited about what they are learning. It is very refreshing for a professor like me. You've already heard now a lot about muscle health, and I'm going to revisit that a little bit, but I want to weave several ideas together in the time that I have with you. We're going to talk in a big sense about metabolism, but we're not only going to mention the muscle, but also how sleep and stress can play a part of helping ensure that you have healthy metabolism. And remember, I want you to pay attention, not because I'm going to have a quiz, but because you need to learn this material well enough that you can go and teach someone else. So if you aren't yet, get off your phones and take notes. It's time to learn. Now, how bad is the metabolic problem in Asia? Up to half of all adults through East and Southeast Asia have diabetes or pre-diabetes. So this is a problem that is the most common health problem in this part of the world. Half of all the adults you know will have a metabolic issue. And in fact, it's a little worse in Asia than it even is in North America. Where Dr. Reynolds and I are coming from at our university, if you look at the levels of glucose in a Caucasian population versus an Asian population, we see in the Caucasian group that glucose levels are generally in a normal range. They're somewhere in the 80s, mid to high 80s. And this is a normal number. However, if you look at the same glucose levels in an Asian adult population, then all of a sudden we see that the glucose levels are several points higher. So there is a glucose problem in Asia that is worse than it is in Western Europe and North America, in Caucasian populations. Now, you will have a friend who will say, why? Remember, you teach this idea. You teach the idea that we have a glucose or a metabolic problem here, and it's worse here than in other parts of the world. Now, in the time we have together this morning, I want you to take away two very important lessons. One, I want you to appreciate why this matters. Why is it important to control your glucose? Why is it important to not have glucose levels going so high all the time? That's number one. Now, number two is why does this happen? And then within that is some solution. So why does it matter and why does it happen? These are 2 points I want to make sure you understand. Let's start with why should your friends be worried about their glucose levels? One problem among many is that glucose is sticky. Imagine it acting like honey in your body, where just like honey is very sticky if you get it on your fingers, glucose can be very sticky when it starts to connect with other parts of your body like proteins or different types of fats and all kinds of different molecules. We call these things, when they bind and it will damage the protein, these are called glycation products. Or we can just say that a molecule like a protein will get glycated. This is the process of glycation. This is actually something that Dr. Reynolds studies a lot, and we have published several papers on this topic. So it's funny for me to be talking about glycation when he is an expert on glycation. But remember, this is why it matters. When you teach your friends that here in Asia, adults have higher glucose levels than Caucasians do, they may say, well, so what? It matters, because let's look at what happens. If the brain undergoes glycation, or the heart can undergo glycation, the kidneys can undergo glycation, and even our skeletals, our bones. Now, in the brain, if you have too much glucose in the brain, that can increase the risk of Alzheimer's disease. I think everyone here is a little bit afraid of Alzheimer's disease. Now, what about the heart? When the heart undergoes glycation, it can make the muscle of the heart start to fail. So you increase the risk of heart failure. And the kidneys, when they undergo glycation because the glucose levels are so high, that is the leading cause of kidney failure in adults. Too high of blood glucose. And then even our bones can undergo glycation, where the glucose will stick to the bones like sticky honey, and it will start to erode the bones, causing osteoarthritis or a weakening of the bone mass within the body. Now, we don't measure these things in a clinic. You can't go in and have your brain measured for glycation or your bones. And so what we will do in a clinic is measure the degree to which your red blood cells have undergone glycation. Within the red blood cell is a molecule called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is what will carry oxygen through your blood. Every time you breathe and we take oxygen in, it's the hemoglobin on our red blood cells that will move the oxygen through the body. But when hemoglobin undergoes glycation, because the glucose levels are so high, then it doesn't carry oxygen very well. The oxygen gets kicked off. So we can't move oxygen well. Our red blood cells aren't working very well. But this is something that can be measured. When we measure this, we call it hemoglobin A1C, or just HbA1c. Does that look familiar? You've probably had this measured before on a blood test. Sometimes it's just A1C. Now you know what it is. A1C is a marker of glycation in your body because we can easily measure the blood. Like I said, you can't take a biopsy of your brain or a biopsy of your bone and measure the glycation there. And so in order to understand the glycation level, we measure someone's blood. And here's a general category or a cutoff where we typically will say a person has diabetes if their A1C level gets up to about 6.5%. Now, if high glucose levels are a problem in Asia more than other parts of the world, how do A1C levels compare between Caucasian and Asian populations? Who would have a higher glycation level? Of course, the Asian adults do. So there is a unique metabolic problem that affects Asian adults more than other adults. You need to remember this and teach it to your friends. Okay, so now you know why it matters. That as blood glucose levels are too high, glycation is happening more, and where there is more glycation, there is tissue damage. All right, now, how does this happen? Why is it that an Asian adult experiences higher glucose levels than, say, a Caucasian adult? This is another important point. There are very compelling studies in human adults that have shown just how bad this problem is. So here's one study I want to share with you. If you have a Caucasian adult and an Asian adult, and you give them both the exact same amount of sugar, naturally their blood glucose levels will go up. But in the Asian, it will go up more than twice as high as it goes up in the Caucasian. So in the Asian body, that glucose level will go up 2 times higher in the blood than it will in the Caucasian, even if they're the exact same body. Imagine 2 Dr. Bickmans. One here, Caucasian Dr. Bickman with bald hair and freckles, and then imagine Asian version of Dr. Bickman with nice, beautiful black hair and no freckles. That sounds better. But Asian version of Dr. Bickman, if we both drink sugar, Asian Dr. Bickman will go 2 times higher on blood glucose. That is a huge difference, even in an identical body. One of the big differences is muscle mass. Muscle matters, and also the other principle I want to teach you is sleep deprivation. These, I believe, are 2 of the big problems that can explain why an Asian adult will have blood glucose levels that go so much higher. Let's start with muscle mass. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about this because Dr. Reynolds already did a wonderful job teaching you the principles. But I just want you to understand why the problem might be worse in Asia than in other parts of the world. I want to share with you a study that was just published a few years ago. They looked at the amount of muscle mass in adults around the world, and they found that Asian adults tended to have the lowest amount of muscle mass among all of the ethnicities they measured. Remember, that matters because where does glucose go? When we drink or eat a bunch of sugar or a bunch of starches from bread or rice or cereal, we take in the glucose, and then we see our blood glucose levels go up. But then how does the blood glucose levels go down? Of course, it's because the muscle is very hungry. It's like a demanding little child who keeps wanting more and more, and the blood glucose will go into the muscle. 80% of the glucose when we take in carbohydrates will go into our muscle. So if we don't have as much muscle, there's just less place for the glucose to go. And so the glucose will linger in the blood. And if we have less muscle, glucose levels will be much, much higher. Now let me just show you this in a slightly different perspective. I need you to understand that in order to have good glucose control, we need muscle. Muscle will take in the glucose, which will then allow the insulin hormone to be lower and go down. But of course, if we have less muscle, that means we can't move the glucose in. And so blood glucose will be much higher. And if blood glucose is high because the muscle isn't sufficient to take it in, then the insulin will be higher as well. So I will say it again. If you know someone who is worried about their glucose levels, you tell them you need to be worried about your muscle. We need more muscle in order to control blood glucose levels. Now, what can you do about it? This is what Dr. Reynolds already spoke about. If we have lower muscle mass, we need more muscle mass. Of course, that means you have to exercise, but you can also help the hungry muscle with superior protein, with superior amino acids, and leucine and HMB, and then, of course, creatine as well. And Dr. Reynolds already taught you Stronghold has been specifically designed to help with muscle mass. So as you talk to your friend and you tell them, they may share with you, my blood glucose or my blood sugar levels are high. And you say, what are you doing to help your muscles be big and strong? Because big, strong muscles are hungry muscles, and they want to eat more blood glucose. Okay, so that's one problem that is unique to Asian adults. We need to try to increase muscle mass. But there's a second problem. And some of you are not going to be happy hearing me tell you this, and that is sleep deprivation. If a human body is not getting enough sleep, then they experience a significant increase in the most famous of all stress hormones, and that hormone is cortisol. So if you have too little sleep, you have more stress, and cortisol will be up a lot. And one thing that cortisol does very, very well is it increases blood glucose. In fact, cortisol will strip the proteins from your muscle and send it to the liver to tell your liver to make more blood glucose. Cortisol will destroy your muscle in order to increase blood glucose levels. Now, I want to scare you a little bit, just so you appreciate how bad this problem is. There was a paper published by a very good university here in Korea, and they found that if you had an adult in Korea who got less than 7 hours of sleep per night, their fasted glucose levels the next day were 48% higher. Do some of you get less than 7 hours of sleep a night? I bet you do. I bet most of you do not get 7 hours. But that's what was so important. They found that 7 hours was the cutoff. If you were getting less than 7, your blood glucose levels are going to be 50% higher the next day. That should scare you a little bit. Now, you might be thinking, well, Dr. Bickman, that's not fair. Everybody in the whole world sleeps so poorly these days. Why should you be upset with us here in the Asia-Pacific region? Well, it's because it's worse here than anywhere else. There was a paper just published a few years ago that actually documented sleep habits around the entire world. And they found that some areas of the world and some countries would get more or less sleep than others. And here was the grand total. Well, that's a lot of countries to look at, but thankfully they summarized all of the data for us. And look how bad it is here in Asia. On average, adults in Asia will get less sleep than anywhere else in the world. Anywhere else. So I am with you all now, and I feel your pain because I'm a terrible sleeper, but you are not getting enough sleep. And remember, when we don't get enough sleep, cortisol levels will be higher. So your friend may tell you, I'm worried about my blood glucose levels. And you say, you already talked to them about muscle. And they said, okay, I'm trying to improve my muscle. What else can I do? You need to improve your sleep. But they want to know how. And thankfully, you will teach them how and give them some solution. First of all, I want you to teach them about L-theanine. That's a mouthful. That's an awkward word. And so good luck saying that word. L-theanine. There was a paper just published that found that just taking L-theanine was sufficient to improve every single part of sleep. People were able to fall asleep faster. They were able to sleep more deeply and longer. And they had what is commonly called better sleep architecture. They were going in and out of all of their sleep cycles very, very well. Now, L-theanine actually works better when it is coupled with magnesium. In fact, this paper found that a combination of magnesium and L-theanine, the magnesium helped the L-theanine work much better than when it was just L-theanine alone. But we don't need to stop there because there are other studies that have looked at a molecule from plants called ashwagandha. Ashwagandha has been shown in study after study. There are so many papers published on this, finding that ashwagandha can not only help lower cortisol, which can soften the blow if you are sleep deprived, but it can also help sleep be better. Now, of course, if I'm talking about sleep, I have to mention the most famous sleep supplement on the planet, which is melatonin. But melatonin is an artificial molecule as it's produced and turned into supplement version. There's actually a natural source of melatonin called herbatonin. And one is synthetic, one is plant-derived. One contains polyphenols and antioxidants. One has a very fast release and it acts quite quickly and then it wears off, whereas the other will have a slower release and have a more delayed effect. Of course, herbatonin is the one that has all of the advantages. So when you hear people talk about melatonin, you say, I don't want to take melatonin. I want herbatonin. I want a natural version of it. It's going to work a little more effectively and have some other beneficial molecules than just melatonin alone. This is a wonderful combination. The L-theanine, the magnesium, the ashwagandha, the herbatonin. You tell your friend about all of these and they will say, well, where can we get all of these in one? Well, it is no surprise that where sleep is such a problem in Asia, you have a market. You Unicity has been so determined to help that there is a product, the Sleep Essentials, designed to help people sleep better. So Sleep Essentials ought to be part of your solution in helping your friends sleep better and feel better metabolically. Okay, now what else? Because we don't need to stop with just sleep. How else can your friend lower their glucose levels? Because they might want to do all kinds of things. Maybe they're very worried about their diagnosis if they've been told they have prediabetes or they've been told they have type 2 diabetes. Well, there are two other things you can help your friend with. One, you tell them you need to control carbs. And some of you have heard me talk about this before. As a metabolic scientist, I focus on these two principles. Number one, they must control carbs. But that's not it. You tell them you also need to learn how to fast more frequently. And these are not easy. They're very simple ideas. But when you start to ask someone to change what and how often they eat, they might not be very happy with you. It's hard to do, even if the idea is simple. Number one, control carbs. How can you help your friend control carbs? The first thing you can do is focus on fiber. If you eat carbohydrates or you eat a bunch of sugar, you're going to have a big insulin effect, a big glucose effect in your blood. But if you add fiber to that carbohydrate, like in the form of balance, you can significantly lower the glucose and the insulin response in the blood. Even if the person doesn't change what they're eating, they just simply add a delicious drink to what they're eating, they can have a metabolic buffer or a metabolic advantage to it. So it becomes an easy solution. It's not hard because you're not forcing them to change the big parts of their habits, like what and how often they're eating. Not yet. Now, we actually conducted some studies within Unicity to determine when is it best to take balance. Should you take it before or should you take it during? We actually found that the effect was significantly better by taking balance during the meal, which is really easy because you might forget. You might just get into, you go out to eat or you walk into the kitchen and you start eating something and you think, oh, I forgot to take balance before I ate. That's fine, take it then. So you mix up your balance and you're drinking it while you're enjoying whatever the carbohydrate was. It works at its best when you take it together. All right, now what else? As much as you're focusing on fiber and balance helps you do that, you also teach your friend about chlorogenic acid. Chlorogenic acid has been shown in humans to kind of act like fiber acts, where it results in a significant reduction in the glucose and the insulin levels. Now, it doesn't act in the same mechanism. Fiber acts by slowing the degree to which this carbohydrate is digested in your intestine. Chlorogenic acid actually helps by accelerating your body's burning of the glucose. You're revving the engine, and the engine's burning more fuel. In this case, the fuel is the glucose. Now, your friend is going to ask you, where on earth can I get chlorogenic acid? And you can tell them, I've got something that can help. Because Unimate has been specifically designed to be enriched with chlorogenic acid. In fact, it's very fun for me to be on this stage talking about Unimate because the very first convention I ever attended with Unicity was when Unimate was first released. I think it was 2016 in Singapore. Some of you can yell at me if I'm wrong, but I remember when it came out, and I loved it. I was so happy because I knew of some of the benefits to the mitochondria, some of the benefits to blood glucose and insulin resistance. You have a very powerful tool. But in fact, Unimate's ability to help goes beyond its ability to just control glucose. Because remember, there's the second point of what you tell your friend. Number one was you need to control carbs. Number two is you need to frequently fast. We eat too often. Everywhere in the world, we eat too often. The moment the sun comes up, we're eating food. And then 2 hours later, we're eating more food. And then it's lunch and we're eating more food. The average person nowadays is eating or drinking some food from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed. And you tell your friend, you need to take a break. But your friend will tell you, but I don't want to take a break because I get so hungry. So how can we help our friends control their hunger in order to fast more frequently? Because fasting is the fastest way to control blood glucose. Nothing happens as fast as fasting. But fasting can be difficult. It's uncomfortable. So how can we help our friends control their hunger? One thing, you can teach your friends about molecules that we can taste and eat called bitter tastings. These are things that we can eat or drink and we taste very bitter. And some of the most potent bitter tastings are molecules called theobromine and saponins. These are two molecules that when we taste them in our mouths, it will help reduce our hunger. So you teach your friend, your friend will say, it is so hard for me to fast, I get so hungry. Then you tell them, well, you need to taste something bitter. And they will say, well, where can I get something bitter? You say, I have something that can help. Because Unimate is also enriched with these bitter tastant molecules. And the science surrounding bitter tastants is fascinating. This paper was published and it found not only do we taste bitter in our mouth, but it also affects our fat cells. So we drink a Unimate, we taste the bitter molecule in our mouths. It's a unique flavor. It's a little bitter. It's wonderful. I love it. And then it moves through our intestines, and these bitter tastings will get absorbed into our blood. And then they will go to our fat tissue. And when our fat tissue tastes these molecules, they will send a signal to our brain and tell the brain we're not hungry. That is fascinating. The fact that our fat cells are tasting these molecules is to me incredible. It's incredible. And this is part of the genius of Unimate and how Unimate can help people control their hunger. Now, even independent of hunger, your friend may say, well, I'm not hungry, I'm just craving sugar, right? We all know what that's like. We crave something sweet. We want to eat it or we want to drink it and we want it right now. So how can your friend control cravings? These same bitter tastants, theobromine and saponins, have been found to control sweet cravings. When we taste something sweet, or when we taste something bitter, we don't care as much for the something that is sweet. Now let me just share with you one point that is so important about this. Have you heard of all of these big GLP-1 drugs? Semaglutide, Wegovy, or Ozempic? Have you heard of these drugs? Are they getting popular here in Asia, in Japan, in Korea, in Southeast Asia? They are. They're getting popular everywhere. One of the ways they work, they have been shown to really reduce people's cravings for sweet foods. And when someone starts these weight loss drugs, for the first 6 months, their sweet cravings are gone. Their desire for chocolate or sugary sodas just drops. When they're on the drug for 12 months, guess what? It starts to come back. Then when they're on the drug for 2 years, their sweet cravings have gone right back to where they started, even though they are still on the drug. This is one of the reasons why their weight starts to come back. They regain their weight. So these drugs can never be a long-term solution because they don't work well over time. You may have a friend who's been on the weight loss drug and they're finding their sweet cravings come back. How wonderful it is. What a blessing you can be to help them have another way to control their sweet cravings, because that is a big part of the solution to improve weight. We must learn to control our cravings. That is a very difficult thing. All right, so you have 2 things to focus on. As you speak with your friends about how they need to improve their metabolic health, you tell them muscle matters. We have to increase your muscle mass. And then what can they do? In addition to normal exercise, they of course can benefit from Stronghold. Stronghold has been designed to have complementary ingredients. They will work really well together. Some things that Dr. Reynolds mentioned, creatine and HMB together have been shown to improve muscle strength in even old adults in their 70s. So this Stronghold is designed to work together. But also sleep deprivation is an enormous problem in Asia. Remember, the average Asian adult sleeps significantly less than any other adults in any other part of the world. So we need a lot of sleep help in this part of the world. Sleep Essentials has been designed to help with that. From the L-theanine to the magnesium to the ashwagandha to the herbatonin, it is designed to work together. Now, one way these two products can complement each other is the creatine in Stronghold. Dr. Reynolds showed you the study that he showed you how when we take creatine, it helps our brain. Just this year, some of the most interesting data I have ever seen as a scientist looked at how creatine can help offset the effects of sleep deprivation. So what's interesting is we look at Stronghold as a muscle product, and it certainly is designed for the muscle. But let's say you have a bad night of sleep. Yes, Unimate can help you pay more attention. And that's a good thing. So here I will show Feel Great. Unimate can help you be alert and pay attention, but it's the creatine that can help you remember. So even right now, as you've been listening to me, and you may be thinking, I need Stronghold for my muscles. You're taking your Unimate to stay awake, because I know it can be very boring when you're listening to a professor give a lecture. You might be getting sleepy. Well, Unimate can help you pay attention, but the creatine in Stronghold can help you remember. Creatine helps with memory and it helps with cognition. So these supplements can complement each other in very, very good ways. The Sleep Essentials is helping improve your sleep. The ashwagandha is helping reduce the cortisol if you've had a bad night of sleep. Stronghold has amino acids to help support muscle growth. And the bigger the muscles, the easier you're going to control your glucose. And Balance helps control glucose. Unimate helps control glucose. And the creatine in Stronghold can even help you remember better if you've had a bad night of sleep. So you have a tremendous amount of help that you can offer your friends. And don't think of them as separate things. Look at all of these products as individual component of gears in one single engine. And the focus is to improve metabolic health, from muscle to sleep deprivation to improving energy. You have at your fingertips Stronghold, Sleep Essentials, and Feel Great, all of which can work together to help improve your friends and your metabolic health. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful time. Thank you.
With Stronghold.